Welcome, Lisa, even to the Up at the Edge podcast. I am so excited to talk to you about joy today and why
Yes,
it's relevant to a high performing culture. So, welcome to the
absolutely.
show.
Thank you.
And you are a podcaster as well. You have a podcast called What's Your Ripple Effect? Yes.
Yeah, have good
Awesome.
ripple effect.
I know. And I love that because I talk a lot about how we influence our spheres of influence without being
Yeah.
a leader with a title. So, before we dive into all the goodness on creating joy and a positive team culture and all the results that that gives you as a leader, can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you even got into this work of your book Joy is My Job? Like, how did you get here?
Yeah, it's a fun. I laugh, isn't it fun? I just want to sit and have coffee with you all day
Yeah.
and be like, here's all the things. But the down and dirty of it is, I entered the workforce and was a project manager. So I love deadlines and milestones. And I had a senior leader tap me on the shoulder and say, you really get people to get things done. Like, you are highly productive. And I didn't have direct reports at that time.
Mhm.
I when we talk about informal power, I was kind of this 20 something being like to the C-suite exec, like, hi, I need you to do this thing. And when that senior leader said, I think you're a people leader, and she said, I'd love to move you from project management to operations, I was like, yeah, let's do it. So I led large teams in healthcare, and it was the most rewarding thing. Like, I just want to try on everyone's glasses and see from their perspective of, like, my cranky employees of like, I'm not doing it. I'm like, okay, can I just try on your glasses? Like, before I get mad, I just want to see what you see. And so fast forward to today, I do a lot of keynote speaking around creating impact through your ripple effect. And then I always
Mhm.
say, as a side note, I was a little burnt out along that journey, and my husband and I decided to track our joy like a bank account. So we hung a whiteboard in our bedroom and
I
we
love
started
this so
tracking
much.
it
Yeah.
because I thought, well, if we wait for joy to find us, we're going to wait forever. And if it's
Never
not a
gonna happen.
metric in our life,
Right.
that's it. So that's the down and dirty version of
Wow.
Lisa
And
Even.
how are you doing? How long have you been doing that tracking and how's it going?
It's going so well. We've done it for about 8 years.
Uh-huh.
For a while, it was just us, and then we had some friends who we were just telling about the whiteboard, and they're like, "What? The whiteboard in your bedroom?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we wanted to dream about joy before we fall asleep because sometimes that's the only time we see each other,
Uh-huh.
and we wanted to dream about joy when we wake up."
Uh-huh.
And so it moved from whiteboard to calendar to now tracking. And I also speak to audiences additionally to culture. We talk about, how are you sneaking some joy in
Uh-huh.
before, during, and after everything that you already do.
Completely. Okay. So many questions about that. I'm going to take a minor detour. Do
Yes.
you do you both have a shared definition of joy though?
Yes. And this is where I say, like, disclaimer, Lisa is not a scientist and
Yeah.
da 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 da, right?
Yeah.
Our definition of joy is things that light us up, things that make us feel more alive. And so we both have a joy calendar. Our kids have them, and they look very different. I actually
Mhm.
have a joy challenge where I say, get in someone else's joy. So once a
Mhm.
month, I sit down and I watch a football game with my husband,
Mhm.
and I
Because that's
nod
his
and I
joy.
smile
Yeah.
because that's
Mhm.
his joy. And he tells me all about how many rushing yards for whatever. And it is the most fun thing to know that my only responsibility during that moment is to enjoy him enjoying his joy. So I don't feel any pressure, right? To be
Yeah.
like, I don't like this. I still don't like this.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like my brain saying, yeah, you don't have to. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love this so much, and I'm laughing inside because I'm like, if I go to my husband right now and be like, "We need a joy calendar," he'd be like, "Oh my God,
Like, what is
who
it?
have you been talking to?" But yeah, I mean,
Yep.
we're very different people. That's why I was
Yes.
asking about that, and I love that idea. I mean, that's empathy, right? Is
It
you are
really
coming
is.
into his space and his world and trying to understand what is important to him, and he's doing the same for you and your kids. I love it so much. So what actually inspired you then to focus on leadership and culture in your work? How did you translate that story
Yeah.
and that journey into realizing, hey, this is actually a catalyst for organizations?
It's funny that I always say, like, my have good ripple effect and my joy journey were happening almost simultaneously. So much like a lot of us, we inherit whatever we're given, right? Like the team or the teams or the locations, and they all have different history and dynamics and all of those parts and pieces. And I was
Hmm.
looking kind of across the landscape and realized that first off, we needed kind of that vision internally. Like we had the organization vision, but we needed kind of
Hmm.
that leader vision. And so the tagline really came about because I said to my team, guys, it's our job to have good ripple effect. Like if we do not keep our waters clean, if we don't, like what is
Hmm.
it going to look like? And everything you say and do is a ripple. Happy or
Yeah.
crappy, your choice. And so I really started off in that direction, just probably more out of like needing to, because I had some pretty like toxic cultures that I inherited. That I
Hmm.
was like, we need a phrase that allows us to self hold each other accountable. And so that's really the first time I walked down the hallway and I heard someone say to someone else, is that really good ripple effect? Like I was a
Oh my
proud
gosh.
leader. Yeah,
Yeah.
just like, yes, they get it. They're starting to identify what's good and what's not. And if it's in there, we need to get it out. Like cultural dysfunction is a huge part
Hmm.
of, productive and
Hmm.
empathetic and joyful teams.
Yeah. Okay, I love this because, as I mentioned, I talk a lot to teams that say, "Well, what do we do about empathy in our culture because our
Mm.
CEO doesn't buy into it?" And you don't have to wait. You can
No,
actually create a microculture within your team that becomes that bright light within the organization. To your point, it has the ripple effect
it
of
does.
impacting other people in the organization. And they start wondering, like, and it's funny because I use this phrasing, what's in the water over there? Why
Yep.
is that team outperforming? Why is it their retention rates are higher? Why is it people are actually smiling over there? Like
Yeah.
what is it that they're
What are they
doing
eating?
that we can replicate and scale and learn from in other teams? So
Absolutely.
you don't have to wait for the corporate mandate to be,
Yep.
this is how you should operate. If you don't like the culture, the larger culture you're swimming in, you can create a microculture as a leader. And I've worked for organizations where the organizational culture wasn't great, but our
Yep.
team was this fantastic unit and it was so fun to work with them. So
Yeah.
I want to get into joy because just to share a little story with you, and I've shared this
Yeah.
with my listeners before, when I was working on the empathy dilemma and I was kind of deconstructing the recipe of what
Mm.
makes an empathetic leader both empathetic and high performing at the same time. Like what was the secret sauce?
Yep.
And I spoke to hundreds of leaders, I did lots of research and I found these pillars that are true of all of these leaders that seem to be doing this effortlessly. And at first there were only four. And I was wondering what was missing. I was like, something's
Mm.
missing in here. And I went back and I realized it was joy. I realized it was this element of, and not that you had to be the funniest leader in the room,
Yep.
but that there was an element of camaraderie and of levity, even when the work is hard, right? And I saw this in very stressful environments, right? Healthcare, police, like it didn't matter what environment the work was. It was how the team had each other's back and had that
Yeah.
camaraderie together. And it was joy. And it was making time for moments of joy, to your point. So tell me a little bit about, and maybe give us some examples of how do you start people on that journey if they're like, something's missing, we're not feeling really good about
Yeah.
what we're doing? What are some small steps that a leader or team can take to inject joy into their work?
Yeah, and I will actually even go a little bit personal and professional because I think they tie together. The first thing that I always scan when I'm looking at my teams is number one, do they have desire, permission, and belief? And what I mean
Hmm.
by that is like I do some joy sessions with organizations. I had a woman raise her hand and say, I have enough joy, thanks. And it was like the perfect moment. I literally would like let it hang in the air. And I'm like, you're right. You're right. Like, if you have enough, you're right. If you don't have enough, you're right. There really has to be a desire for it. And if you notice that your team isn't there yet, that's something to start working on of how do we think about if we don't have the desire, what's getting in the way? And
Hmm.
I talk about it in the book where we're looking at kind of, and I'll use the word this loosely, but just so listeners understand, it's like the excuses. Well,
Hmm.
Lisa, I can't have joy. I have 1,000 emails.
Yeah.
Lisa, I can't have joy because I have a report due on Friday. And we really had to start like peeling the onion back to say, what if you could be two things at once?
Yeah.
Like desire, you have to want it a little, and then you
Yeah.
have to believe that we can have it, right? And you have to have a little permission. And so we talked a lot about our team culture of what if we can be busy and friendly? What if we can be busy and joyful?
Right.
Like that would be good ripple effect. And so it's really a lot of those like I do a lot of culture work around like attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot like that. What is our attitude? How are we feeling?
Mm-hmm.
What behaviors do we see going on? What are we keeping? What are we getting rid of? And do
Mm-hmm.
we believe it to be true? If, if a new team member says or an older team member says to a newer one, oh, it never changes around here. It's
Yeah.
like, that's a belief. Like I take notice. And I think
Yeah.
that ties together of joy of really saying like, what's our attitude?
Mm-hmm.
What are the behaviors that we can infuse? And then do we believe it? Do we really truly believe it? And
Yeah.
some teams are faster and slower at grasping the concept,
Uh-huh.
and that's okay. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's just a little like roll up the sleeves, a little bit more work.
Totally. Well, you're trying to shatter old belief systems and old paradigms of what work
Yes.
should be, right? And I'm always talking about both and leadership. And in the context of empathy, you can be empathetic and high performing. You can be compassionate
Absolutely.
and competitive at the same time.
Hmm.
And it's only when we think it's an either or equation that we swing so far, the
The other
pendulum
way.
swings so far,
Yeah.
right? You swing between being a dictator and being a
Yep.
pushover, but
Yeah.
there's a happy medium in there. So, and I love what you're saying here about deciding to infuse joy. Now, one of the things I know I've worked with, well, so two things here. One is to your point about the excuses. It's we don't have time, right?
Hmm.
We don't have time for what seems to be a waste of time. So what do you
Yep.
say to leaders? I mean, they're obviously not hiring you, but what do you say to those leaders who are like, we don't have time to fool around?
Yep.
That's kind of how they say it
Yeah, they
sometimes.
do, don't they?
Yeah.
And I will say, if they say that, I'll say, let me ask you this. How burnt out are you? Well, I'm so burnt out. They go into their like mantra and I let them. I listen and I like have a little bit of poker face. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, how stressed are you? They were like, I am so stressed. I did not sleep last night. And you're like, yeah. Right. And you have them tell the story of, so it sounds like you're in not a really great spot. And then I say to them, like, how's that going?
Yeah.
And I let it hang a little bit in a really thoughtful and curious and like empathetic way of like, is that good? And they're
Yeah.
like, well, no. And then I kind of like lead them softly into this conversation about what if you could enjoy it a little, like that
Yeah.
joy word. And then they're like, Lisa, and I laugh and I
Yeah.
kind of smile and I say, and I'm not talking about the big grandiose things. I just say like, what if we could think about our day differently? And so one
Hmm.
of the tactics that I would often use, again, I'm not a scientist, but I would say crappy to happy. So there are unglamorous things that we do in our day, Excel
Hmm.
spreadsheets, reports, phone
Hmm.
calls, you
Although
name it.
those, I always say those do bring some people joy.
They do,
I
but
don't
let's
understand
pretend
those
they
people, but
didn't.
yeah.
Yeah. I always say, like, make a list of the most unglamorous things, the things that just drive you bonkers. In
Yeah.
the construction industry, it's carrying drywall. In the hospitality industry, it's like cleaning up. Like, what are those things, right? Depending on the industry. And they can usually like rattle them off. And then I'm like, okay. So if we've got things that are really unglamorous,
Hmm.
and we know that we have to do them. Like we don't get to not do them. I
Hmm.
say, it's your job to find a little happy after the crappy. We're going to take crappy, guys, and we're going to make it happy. And so
Hmm.
I will say to them, like before, during, or after, what can we do? And in my world, I worked in a very large hospital and I had people at my front desk and I would walk up to them and I'd say, "Hey, how's it going today? Crappy to happy. What do we got?" And they would say to me, before nowadays things are automated, right? You get patient phone calls, but back in the day, they were not. We would make hundreds of phone calls per day and
Hmm.
leave voicemails of like, "Hi, so and so, see you on Thursday." And so I would say to them, "Crappy to happy." And they would say to me, "All right, we got 300 phone calls." And I'm like, "All right, that's the crappy. What's the happy?" And it was a lot of them starting to think about it's my job, right, to add in a little something happy after. And so they're like, "I think after 300, we're getting Starbucks." And I'm like, "Yeah." Or they're like, "We're taking a lap around the building." But it was their job to take it from, I have to do these unglamorous things, but I also can infuse a bit of levity and fun in my
Yes.
day. And I would literally high five them and say, absolutely. And you can do that in your personal life too. Like I
Hmm.
had a woman after a session, she goes, my mom is aging and is in the nursing home.
Hmm.
I said, yeah. And she goes, and it is awful to visit her. Like we just sit there and look at each other and don't really know what to say. And she goes, crappy to happy. I said, all right, what is it? And she goes, I think I'm going to bring a game next time. I
Hmm.
said, yeah. It just gets your brain thinking about how you take accountability for it and
Hmm.
also give yourself permission to do it.
Hmm.
Big.
Well, and you made a great point here. It's also about the language we use and how we
Mhm.
talk to ourselves. And
Yeah.
this has always been for me. I don't have to work out. I get to work out,
Right.
right? And so,
And we smile and we're like,
you could
yes.
apply it to so many other things. Like I don't like to vacuum, but it's really great that I have this awesome house I get
To
to keep
vacuum.
clean, right?
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a stretch, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
it's using the language of just we were just talking, my husband and I were just talking to our son about this the other day in the car
Yeah.
and about how I was talking to him about saying I flipped how I was talking and I said I don't have to do this thing. I get to do this thing. And how it really just changes your outlook and
It
it
does.
sounds really almost juvenile, but like you're trying to trick yourself. But it's true. It's how we talk to ourselves and how we approach the work. And so, no matter what it is, you can try to find joy in it. And if that's not enough, what's a way that you can set the environment so that it's more pleasing, right?
Yes.
Okay, you've got to start doing your taxes. Can you make like your favorite latte
Right.
and light a candle and put some great music on and like make it a more joyful experience for yourself? But we're so
Absolutely.
primed to just be like, get it done, get it done, get it
I
done.
know.
And that's the grind, right?
It is. And I always say, like, when you go to start thinking about joy, and we're going to put it on your calendar somewhere,
Hmm.
I always say start small. Like, I have a good friend, and this is a personal example, but I think it relates in the professional world as well.
Hmm.
She will call me and she'll say, what are you doing? And I'll say, I'm, doing all the life things, right? Laundry and dishes and kid things. And she'll say, do you have 15? And I say, yeah, I do. And literally, she drives over to my house. I meet her in the driveway with a sparkling water, sometimes a drink, right? And we
Yeah.
stand there for 15 minutes. She like gets out of her car. We're standing there in the driveway, 15 minutes, we chit chat, and then we're like, all right, back to it. Bye.
Yeah.
And it's actually some of my most fun, the like moments
Hmm.
of the week because we
Hmm.
tell each other a story or something that happens, or it's just a little bit of a boost. And I think
Yeah.
about even in your workspace when you're working on a project or you've got, Q2, is almost over. I would say like save 15 minutes
Uh-huh.
for something other than work.
Yeah.
And it's hard at first and it feels awkward, but I always say like keep going because
Hmm.
before you know it, you're going to start to look forward to it.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a part of your routine and there's so
Right.
much research on habit development
Yeah.
that you then are like, "Oh, I just do this."
Well, I think also that's what, there's a whole nother conversation about return to work and hybrid work and remote work. And I have lots of opinions about both sides of that. But I think that is the thing for people that are proponents of going back in the office is they sometimes they miss those moments. They
Yeah.
miss those moments of like, this is too much. I'm going to get up and I'm going to go to the break room or I'm going to go to the coffee bar or whatever. Do you want to come with me?
Yeah.
And we're just going to step away from our desks for a little bit. That's the
It's the
whole
water
essence
cooler
of the
talk.
water cooler. I know exactly. It's those
Yes.
serendipitous moments where you take a second to just forget the work and be human for a
And you're
second.
casually like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're
So
casually in existence.
for sure. And so let's talk about what are some common challenges that leaders face in maintaining a healthy culture? And where can some of the things that you talk about and teach help alleviate that?
Yeah, I think about culture in almost like the ripple itself. So the
Mhm.
sort of center circle is really you, and we talk a lot about like how you doing, how you showing up, and we think about it from the angle of, if I see someone walk down the hall, I prepare for them. I think, oh, not today. Like, not today. People prepare for you. And so, as we think about our presence being the present, the gift that we give our team, I often
Mhm.
will give teams an opportunity to think about how are you showing up? I once had an employee turn to me and she just casually said, "Oh, you show up busy." And I was like horrified.
Yeah.
I'm like, I am so fun and so energetic, right? In my mind, I'm like,
Yeah.
I kind of did like a awkward ha ha ha. And I walked
Yeah.
back to my office, but I was like, I do not show up busy. But she was right. I did because I thought that showing up in a way that was like, we got all these things, I got this done, was a gift. And what it was actually doing was the gift of busy. And
Hmm.
so being able to really think about it from your angle first. And then I always
Hmm.
say, I do some values exercises of like what's important to you and what's important to your team.
Yeah.
And then we start to look at like how are you culturally? I actually have like a three columns where I'm like, how are we feeling attitude wise?
Hmm.
What are some of the behaviors? Like what is it normal to see? One of my favorite examples, I had a new employee start and I said to her, I go, you're new here. You have fresh eyes. Like, what's something interesting or odd that you've seen around here? And I was
Hmm.
alluding to like our culture and the behaviors that we do on a daily basis. She
Hmm.
looked me up and down, kind of almost as if to say, like, do I trust you?
Yeah.
I waited her out, I held, and then she goes, do we take a lunch? I knew what she was talking about because there
Yeah.
was this really funny behavior in a pocket of our team where they sat at their desk and they worked through lunch. And I
Hmm.
said, well, HR would like me to tell you to take a lunch legally. Yes. And I said,
Yeah.
but what do you mean? And I knew what she meant, but she goes, well, I went to go take a lunch, and one of the other nurses in our office turned to me and says, where are you going? And I told her, I'm going to take a lunch and I'm going to walk around the building. And she goes, we work until the work is done. And I
Oh,
said, oh, I said, what'd you do? She goes, well, I sat back down and I worked at my desk. And she goes, but I think if they took a lunch, they'd be nicer humans. And I kind of
yeah.
laughed at her and I said, you are right. You bumped up into what I will call a like ecosystem norm. This is very normal for them. They
Yeah.
don't even notice it. It's a behavior they've done forever. I
Hmm.
said, it's really not official. Like it's not in our handbook.
No.
I said, my advice to you is to the next time you want to take a lunch and walk around the building, I said, it's going to be hard. It's going to be so hard. But I want you to say to her, I'm going to work until the work is done right after lunch. I'm going to
Yeah.
take a quick walk and I'm going to be even better and I'm going to work harder. And then a few weeks later, I saw her in the hall. I'm like, are you taking a lunch? And she goes, sometimes. And I
Yeah.
smiled. Well, even funnier, like a few months later, the nurse that had mentioned that had an injury where she was supposed to, her physical therapist told her to walk.
Uh-huh.
And so she looked at her, she goes, I'm walking with you at lunch. And it
Nice.
was just a very, like I would say as a leader, have your finger on what norms are occurring, what behaviors,
Hmm.
and start to have those conversations and teach people how to shift them
Yeah.
because it really does take a lot of forethought to be able to think, we've always done it that way, but do we like it?
Right.
And you can believe attitudes turn into behaviors, which turn into beliefs. And then before you know it, it's so ingrained that you're like, it's
Yeah.
going to be harder to change once it gets to a belief
Right.
statement.
Right. So, so good. Um, how do you balance that? This is always the perennial question I'm asking is balancing empathy and all of these things with high performance and ambition. So how do
Yeah.
you help leaders encourage accountability, accountability and impact while still making time for joy and not letting
Yeah.
things go off the rails?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always say like fair, firm, and kind.
Hmm.
And so when we think about, I always, tee up conversations of, if maybe we're trying to get something done or, a project, I'm often saying like, we can be both things at once.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure both things are on track. Like your
Hmm.
joy is on track, but the project is on track. And so I set it up really kind of like expectations of like, talk to me about the project. Where are we at? Talk to me. And I'm firm, fair, and kind
Hmm.
of like, and I ask a lot of questions back. Any risks that we need to think about? Are we, like really kind of teeing that up? And then I'll say, okay, let's talk about our joy.
Hmm.
How are we doing from a scale of our attitudes and how are we feeling? And if we need to take a small break or we need to infuse some joy, let's do it. And so I kind of like bop back and forth, and my team
Hmm.
gets used to this. Like Lisa's fairly like she's gonna drive us to
Hmm.
get our metrics, but she's
Hmm.
also gonna drive us to make sure we're okay along the way.
Hmm.
And then if it like tips into like somebody not performing well, obviously that's a performance conversation, but most of the time, if you are firm, fair, and kind,
Hmm.
and you have some really good language around, well, what does that look like? Does that get us the desired result, whether it's on a technical or reaching a result or on the joy front? I put it back on them to help paint that picture. And then I'm like, so it looks like we're not.
Right. Right.
Like, what does that look like? Where do we go from here? And if they can't figure that out, then I'll say, can I make a recommendation? And then I want you to,
Yeah.
give me your thoughts back. And I always say, like, we'll arm wrestle a little bit along the way.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so important. The third pillar is clarity because clarity is not just kind, it's empathetic. And
Mhm.
when you're able to be clear and show that those performance metrics matter to you,
Mhm.
you can then it's easier to open up. It's easier to build the camaraderie because everybody has the same expectation. And
Yep.
the reason why, for my work, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this,
Yeah.
is the reason why joy is that fifth pillar of being an empathetic leader is because when you create that joy, people get to know each other on a personal level.
Yep.
And so then they care about being empathetic with each other. They care about
Absolutely.
having each other's backs. They care about checking in with each other versus if they're all in their own silos and they're just coming in and doing their work and
They're a
leaving,
robot. Yep.
there's no interaction that fosters the flow of empathy. What do you
Absolutely.
think about that theory?
Yes, I think you're 1,000% right. And I have a worksheet that I give out to my new employees, and it has a list of values. And
Hmm.
I say, like, pick your top three. And I had a team member, a really quick story between Shane and Andrew. So Shane's kind of my jokester, Andrew's kind of my straight-laced guy.
Uh-huh.
And I hand out this worksheet. I do it with, like, when I first joined, I had, all of our team at a morning huddle. I said,
Hmm.
hey, could you circle the three? And then I said, hey, would somebody be willing to share their top value? Now,
Hmm.
Shane raises his hand really fast, mostly to be funny. And I
Uh-huh.
said to him, I said, Shane, like, hi, you were first. Like, what was your top value? And he says to me, and he's never serious, he says, Lisa, when you have a crappy childhood, you make jokes and you keep making jokes because it lightens people's day. And I said, yeah. Now, Andrew, who Shane and Andrew kind of bumped heads, they
Hmm.
were like both in my periphery, so I could kind of see them at the same time. And I could see Andrew like giving him the side eye as almost as if to say, like, so you're not trying to be an idiot every time we turn around? Because Andrew really liked to get work done
Yeah.
and was a really like mover and shaker in that front. After the meeting, I went over and I said, Shane, hey, thanks for sharing that. I said, I want to honor that value. Will
Hmm.
you tell us a joke at our morning meeting? Like, will you start our meeting off with a joke every day? And he looked at me and he goes, do they have to be work appropriate? And I was like, yes, sir, they do.
Yeah.
And for months, he brought jokes to our morning meeting. Well, then they switched to dad jokes. And I'm like, are
Uh-huh.
you going to be a dad? He's like, yeah. On the day that his wife went into labor, I sent an email to the team. I said, hey, at our morning meeting, we need to figure out coverage for Shane. Wife's out. See you in a few minutes. I get to huddle. Andrew raises his hand, and I'm like, hi, Andrew. He never raises his hand. I was like, what's up? And he goes, well, uh, Shane's gone. And I was like, yeah, Shane, like Shane is
Yeah.
gone. And he pulls out a little piece of paper and
Uh-huh.
he goes, well, I looked up a joke.
Aw.
Yeah, when you think about empathy and your ability to build culture, part of that is being able to recognize what's important to
Hmm.
people and how they got the way that they are. And if you
Hmm.
can start to shine a light on, what people value, like I always say that people carry their values when they're mad, like she doesn't trust me and they're not very loyal. They give it to you on a platter. They literally, when you are mad, you
Yeah.
mention the value that has been like violated,
Yeah.
or they do it when they're talking about their kids at the water cooler or their faith or hobbies. And so, as you think about building a team culture and those connections, I often say, like, look for their values because
Hmm.
what they care about is going to drive connection, which is also going to drive joy. And if you realize that your joy doesn't have to match theirs, like we had some pretty funny engagement events because somebody really liked a certain thing.
Right.
And I said to everyone else, I was like, how many of you make it up? How many of you like this? And they're like, not me. And I said, all right. So our job over here is to make like their joy our joy.
Yeah.
And it just gave people permission to not feel like they were being told what to do,
Hmm.
but they were told, like, be a part of it, like in your own way.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, so much of that happened during the pandemic and
Mhm.
lockdown. I know my husband's a chief marketing officer for a company, and they were doing all these fun team building
Yeah.
exercises over Zoom. Like they did a wine tasting one time, they
Oh,
did a
yeah.
create a succulent garden, they did some other stuff, but they also did some activities. And I heard this from other leaders too, where it was like each team member would talk about their hobby or
Oh,
here's
that's
how I'm making
cool.
sourdough bread right now, or here's what's going on in my town. And they gave everyone space within a set meeting, whether it was 5 or 10 minutes. And it was like, hey, Lisa, it's your turn. Talk to us about your favorite hobby. And that was a way for them to not only get to know each other,
Yeah.
but I hadn't thought about it this way before. And I love the language you're using. It was the ability to bring someone else into your joy.
It's
And when that
huge.
is appreciated and acknowledged, you feel closer to those people and
You
you're
do.
more willing to perform and deliver for them.
Absolutely. And I often will say too, like, keep an eye on people's joy levels because if someone says, that it's a question that's on my one-on-one form. I'll give it to you for the show notes, but I have a PB&J worksheet where it's like, the way that I structure my one-on-ones is people,
Hmm.
better ways, and joy. Because I want to know, like, how are you doing?
Hmm.
I want to know, do you have any ideas to make things better around here?
Hmm.
And then I want to know, like, how is your joy? And if
Yeah.
I get to that one part in my one-on-one where the person's like, Lisa, I'm not having any.
Yeah.
That for me, that's like a really great gift. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, thank you. Like, I need to know that
Yeah.
as a leader to know that personally or professionally, you are not in a good spot with
Hmm.
probably joy and then maybe even other things in your lives.
Hmm.
And so it's a real, and there's some prompter questions of like, how do you ask different ways so that it's not like the same thing every, one on one of
Yeah.
like, let me read off this sheet. So like it gives you some like
Yeah.
ways to do that. But I think that joy is a big indicator of hobbies and how are they doing?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, what do you tell a leader who is trying to infuse more joy, but they're having trouble accessing their own joy? Like
Yeah.
they're feeling a lot of pressure about that. What's the way that the team and the culture can sort of contribute to it versus putting it all on the leader, show us what you
Yeah.
got. How are you going to make our team joyful, right?
Yep. Well, and even like I had 5 locations. So I was so spread thin to think that I could create joy for all of them. And so I really looked to my informal leaders, like kind of looked around and looked and said, like, who can I link arms
Like the
with?
Shane story.
Yes, I'm like,
Yeah.
Shane likes to have joy. Like, where are your Shanes? And then we started, we called it like a social club. And you could call it, so I live in Iowa, but was in Wisconsin for a number of years. And it was almost like our supper club, like give it a cute name. And then that group of people, there were like 2 or 3 that raised their hand and said, like, I'd help with some joy around here.
Hmm.
And they started to create, similar to what you described for your husband, small bite-sized activities. And the rule was 5, 10, 15-minute things.
Hmm.
So we had, holiday bingo via email. We had putting little plastic eggs around the holiday times.
Uh-huh.
We had non-denominational things for the folks that didn't celebrate holidays. And it really became, I didn't have to have that burden as a leader.
Right.
My team could help create it. And my kids have a joy list and a joy calendar, and they are way better at joy than me. Like
Hmm.
sometimes I'm like, guys, mom's a little tired. What should we do for some joy? And my
Yeah.
daughter's like, we should do paint by number. And I'm like, yes, we should. And
Yeah.
before I know it, I'm printing off things off the internet. It's the same at work.
Yeah.
Like find those like people that can really help it along.
Yeah. So this leads me to another question, which I get a lot too, is how do you how do you do that in a way that it doesn't feel like forced fun to
Yes.
people?
So I actually say, there's a couple of different versions depending on your personality because what can come out of my mouth might not work for like what you could say or like I could never say that.
Right.
And so I lay the case for joy and I say, guys, is it not stressful around here? Like we are working hard, are we not? And I kind of it's again going back to like getting them to validate the like it's hard, it's wild out here, right? In a
Right.
good like productive way. I'm like it is busy and we are working fast. We deserve joy, do we not? And I kind of like lay the groundwork for like we can be busy, we can be joyful, and then I will say like I would love to start creating mini moments of that around here. And then I leave it for a little bit, right? Like I put that out there in a staff meeting
Yeah.
or a huddle, and I just start dripping on them like coffee, like a little
Hmm.
drip, little drip. And then a few weeks later, I'm like, hey, you know what? I mentioned the other day that I wanted to bring more joy, and I read an article about, this organization that was doing some joy. And then, a few weeks go by, and then I'm like, hey, if anybody wants to take part in this thing
Hmm.
related to some joy, like let me know. And I start to kind of get a sense of like who's up for some joy and who's kind of
Yeah.
like who's not.
Yeah.
Because then those people who are not, I
Yeah.
tell a funny story about a guy on my team who hated our potlucks. His name was Paul. And he would like,
My husband's name is Paul, and he
oh,
always hates this kind of stuff usually. So it's kind of funny.
yes.
Yeah.
And I laugh because like every morning I would walk in and I'd say, "Good morning, Paul. How are you?" And he'd say, "Good morning, Lisa. I'm 2 years and sunny." Right? Like 2 years and sunny. I'm like, "What is this?" Well, fast forward, I went on vacation and we took an overnight ferry, like a big boat. I had never been on a cruise.
Uh-huh.
And I laugh because the woman at the top of the ship, she kind of solved all of my Paul problems because I had been telling this other leader right before I left. I was like, I got this guy, we do this 2 years and sunny thing every morning, and he hates engagement. And the guy goes, I don't know about the engagement stuff, but I think when he says 2 years and sunny, he's talking about his retirement forecast. And I was like, oh, you're so right. Well, I don't have a chance to talk to Paul because I'm leaving for vacation. We
Right.
get to the top of this ship, and my girlfriend and I, there was two couples, my girlfriend and I and our husbands, and the woman at the top of the ship, she welcomes us aboard and she says, "Hey, we got live entertainment, casinos." She's pointing out all these things. And my girlfriend and I look at each other and we're like, live entertainment. And our husbands are like, casinos? We're like fake bickering at this point. She
Uh-huh.
pauses and she goes, "Hi, time out. Can I tell you something?" And we were kind of like laughing, like, yeah, sure. And she goes, not everything is for everyone. Not everything is for everyone. We've got something for everybody on this ship. So you two, live entertainment, great. You two, casinos, great. Welcome aboard. Get on my ship. And I remember looking at her being like, thank you. I went back to Paul Monday morning when I got back and I said, good morning, Paul. How are you? And he goes, good morning. I'm 2 years and sunny. And I was like, hi, are you going to retire in 2 years? And he kind of looked at me. He's like, maybe. I said, yeah. I said, Paul, we got to talk about these potlucks. And he went on and on, like, I hate the potlucks. And I said, I waited him out. And I said, Paul, you are 2 years and sunny. I
Mhm.
got people over here 40 years and cloudy, Paul. 40 years they got left to work. I'm like, these potlucks are not for you. So the next time at potluck, can you not hate the potlucks at the potlucks? And he kind of did this like, "Ugh," and I was like, okay, bye. And like
Yeah.
a few weeks later, someone comes to my office and they're like, you will never believe who brought a dish to potluck. I looked at her, I was like, was it Paul? She goes, yeah, it was. How'd you know? I said, I don't know. I just had a hunch. I went up to him at potluck and I said, Paul, did you bring a dish? And he looked at me, he goes, oh, it's for the kids. And I'm like, yeah, if you can start to like position
Yeah.
it where you're going to have people who are going to love it and people who are going to hate it, you're going to have a
Right.
Paul or two on your team.
Right.
But as soon as they know it's not being forced on them,
Yes.
but you're inviting them to participate,
Yeah.
and sometimes you're inviting them to participate. He didn't need the potluck, but he all of a sudden realized that, Joey, who has 40 more years,
Yeah.
dude, that guy better buckle up. He's got more potlucks than he knows what's coming.
Yeah.
So it's really this kind of like, how do you start to shift, but also drip and also invite? And when you do have a few crankies, like, that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
nod and smile and be like, not today. That's okay.
Yeah.
Not today.
I love it. Oh my God. Such a great story. I love it so much. And I find it hilarious that that person's name was
Yeah,
Paul.
right. Like, you can tell your husband.
So yeah, this has been such a great conversation. Lisa, thank you. We definitely want folks to check out your work and
Yeah.
to check out your books. I want to just remind everyone it's Joy is My Job. And then you have a new book coming out soon. What's Your
Yes.
Ripple Effect and Why It Matters More Than Ever? A Leader's Guide to Creating Lasting Impact and Influence on your team, I guess, right? Influence
Yeah.
on everybody within the
On everybody.
organization,
You can kind of use it
on
across the
everybody.
board.
Okay, great. So we're going to have all your links in the show notes. Thank you so much for all your insights today. For anyone that's on the go, where's the best place they can find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, so lisaeven.com would be the best place to go. And I've got worksheets. You can see my podcast. It kind of is almost like the funnel to all of the resources and
Yeah,
connecting with me and then connect on social. I'd love to hear.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Empathy Edge podcast. If you like what you heard, you know what to do. Rate, review, and share with a friend or a colleague. And until next time, please remember that cash flow, creativity, and compassion are not mutually exclusive. Take care and be kind.